What is up, guys? We're going to be taking a look at this lab, information disclosure on debug page. Now we'll talk about what a debug page is when we get to that point in the lab. Essentially, this lab is information disclosure via HTML comments. Now there's nothing wrong with HTML comments in general, but what developers may sometimes forget is that their HTML comments are visible in the page source. And again, that's not a problem. It only becomes a problem when those comments contain sensitive information. Now you can use Burp Suite for this. It has an option under engagement tools to find HTML comments. But in the case of a fairly short page, we can just head to view page source. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, we see a HTML comment in green font here. And it appears to be a hyperlink. It's an anchor tag and it's pointing to cgibin/phpinfo.php. It then has the text debug, and if you've used PHP before, you'll recognize that this is probably the PHP debug output. It's not something that should be ever exposed to the end user. This is purely for development purposes. But this is not a problem just yet, so long as this link is not actually active. So this could be completely benign. If we try and follow this link, for example, we just get a 404 response. This shouldn't really be in the HTML comments, but it's no problem so long as the PHP debugger is not still active. Let's test it. Now we could simply copy the link into the browser. Another thing we can do is actually edit the DOM. Let's remove these HTML comments and we'll have a functional anchor tag on the page. If we scroll to the bottom of the page, we now see we have a debug link. Let's follow that. And we're greeted with what is known as the PHP debug output, or phpinfo.php. This is a problem. We're not supposed to see this. This is for the developer's eyes only. The key reason is that it contains sensitive information about the configuration on the server. For example, if we run a quick search, we'll be able to access what is known as the secret key. This value here is used for application encryption. So it could be for encrypting sensitive data, such as user data or cookies. Could be used for hashing passwords. Could also be used for signing and verifying session data or tokens. So it's not for network security like HTTPS, for example. That's going to be using something different. This is for data that resides in the application. This is what's protecting that data. We're not supposed to have access to this secret key. The objective of the lab is to grab the key. So let's copy this. On the main page, we have the option to submit solution. Let's paste the key into the dialog box and we get the message, congratulations, you solved the lab. Now this PHP debug page is actually called from a PHP function. It's phpinfo followed by function scopes. The key idea is make sure that it is not available when your app is in production. And rather than just leaving something like phpinfo in your source code, you should ideally wrap it in a conditional. So you can say something like, if app environment equals development, then phpinfo. Whereas if app environment equals production, then don't show phpinfo. That way, as soon as you push your site to production, you know that there are going to be no instances of phpinfo being called. Otherwise, you could simply forget to disable phpinfo when you push the site to production. And as you can imagine, there could easily be phpinfo function calls in the wild disclosing sensitive information, as we've seen in this vulnerable lab. So key ideas here: firstly, make sure your HTML comments don't disclose sensitive information. And secondly, if you're using PHP, make sure phpinfo is not called in a production environment. All right, hope you found it interesting. Thanks for checking out the content, and I'll catch you guys in the next lab.